Okay. Okay, we are recording. Thank you all for coming. Today is our November 4th POPS meeting, and we have quite a number of people here on our Zoom meeting today. I want to thank you all for coming. There's currently 23 people present in the meeting, so I'm going to dispense with saying having everybody do their introductions. It's a bit heavy. It might take up too much time. We have a lot to talk about, but Samantha, are you there? Samantha Delucchi? Hello? I saw her on the screen earlier. Oh, I lost her.
I hear something.
I do too. I'm just looking for Samantha. Did we somehow lose her? She was going to talk about Golden Gate Park closures. Okay. I somehow just lost her. Oh, here we go. She just came back in. Okay. She'll be joining in a second here. Samantha, are you there? Hello, Samantha.
Hello.
Hi, Samantha. There you are. We lost you for a moment. I went into a slight panic.
Oh no, hello, I'm here.
Hey, we've got a lot of people here, so I'm going to kind of dispense with just having everybody introducing themselves this time, just for the sake of time. And I'd like to just dive right into the first subject, which is yours that you were going to discuss regarding, Golden Gate Park closures. Would you like to start, and do you need to present anything?
No, we'll just do a quick overview. I know we have reps from MTA here on the call, and I think I just saw someone from Kids Safe, so everyone could just chime in as they want to. But we are just like making sure that everyone is taking the MTA survey that is out right now. There are 3 potential proposals that MTA is proposing for the future of JFK in Golden Gate Park. One of that is either a one-way access loop, permanent closure, or reopening. And then from there are also additional mobility like access programs that they're going to enhance in and around the park, which is really great. And then, yeah, I mean, there's tons of ways. We just want to make sure that if people have any questions, they just ask us at or the MTA, and yeah, we're here to answer any questions and help provide any clarity that we can.
And Samantha, can you talk about where the proposed closures are, in case there are some people that don't know where in Golden Gate Park these closures are? Are they permanent or are they not? Maybe like how many parking spaces are left over, and how this would work if it was to be permanently closed?
Yeah, so right now the closure is permanent through the Slow Streets program, and with the Slow Streets program, they are it's only for a temporary amount of time. So once the mayor ends for emergency order, it has 90 days until it technically expires. But Rec Park and MTA are looking to solve for that right now for a more permanent solution. And so what that would mean is JFK on the backside where the DeYoung is, that part of JFK would be permanently closed potentially, or they are offering a western access loop on JFK where you would enter in through 8th and then exit and then, or just reopening it, which is not what MTA is currently recommending at this point in time. And then some of the solutions that they're offering are like pedicabs to help people get from point A to point B, and increasing the Golden Gate Park shuttle.
Paul, you have a question? Oh, might I add, since there's so many people on the screen, I can't have everybody at the screen at the same time. If you do have questions, can you raise your hand on the reactions button?
Samantha, could you explain what the second option is, the western part or something? How will, I mean, I'm looking at a map, but exactly what would be open on that option?
So only one lane would be open for traffic. It would be one-way traffic, and then they would keep the other parts of the lanes open to allow for bike and pedestrian safety. And then people would exit out on Transverse, I think that is.
But they would come in on 8th
8th.
Avenue and then go where?
Immediately turn right.
And then go in front of the DeYoung Museum?
And then, so not all the way to the music concourse. So you would turn onto JFK and then drive along the backside of the DeYoung.
Okay, I just saw that Nick Levi here just put up, thank you, Nick, a map for the proposed Golden Gate closures. So if anybody needs to click to that or get that information and get a link.
How do we find that? How do we find that, Albert?
It's on the chat box.
Okay.
And then from that link too, so you'll see the storyboard that talks about the 3 proposed projects. And then it also talks about some of the additional services that they're looking to provide. And then you'll also be able to take the survey, which is what we're just really encouraging people to do, since it will help. At the end, MTA and Rec Park are going to present the survey results to the Board of Supervisors, who will have the ultimate say on what the future of JFK Drive will look like. There are also a number of community events too. So if people want to join in on the community events, you can find all of that on SFMTA's website. They're trying to make themselves as accessible as possible through, like I know they're at like the Clement Street Farmers Market and other like targeted places in and around the area.
Okay. Were there other questions regarding Paula again?
Is there a way to drive from the south side of Golden Gate Park to the north side of Golden Gate Park to get from the Sunset to the Richmond, both on the east side and on the west side? Like right now, you can take 9th and then you can cut over to where the museums are. You can come in 8th, come around, come out 9th. How will merchants and residents get across both at the eastern end and the western end of the park under the various proposals? Samantha?
I mean, I'm definitely not the right person to be asking like what that is going to look like for the residents. I think Rec and Park and MTA are better equipped to answer those questions. So if you have questions, you should reach out to them. And I know you have a rep on the line, so he should be able to like point you in the right direction of who to talk to.
Hi, sorry, Adrian there.
Hi, thanks, and thanks, Samantha, for presenting the survey. First I want to say, Samantha, you sound very informed about the survey and the options. I'm so curious what your own view is, but thank you for plugging the survey. Please, everyone, take that. Paula, was that you asking that question about the east and west access roads?
Yes, that was Paula.
Thanks, Paula. So thanks for that question, Paula. I'm not part of the alignment discussion, so I don't really know all the details. I'm happy to put the project manager that I know in it. His name is Chris Kidd, and I'll put his email in the chat. So you can reach out there if you have specific questions. My sense, and so this is a very broad view. So again, I want to put out a disclaimer because I'm not managing part of the project, but I know some of it, and I know my understanding is the ideology is that the park, because a lot of people are using the park during, as a slow street, have been using the park during pandemic. They've seen a boom in, bicycling and walking and other people, using JFK as just a thoroughfare instead of a roadway and trying to use that as a public space. Because, when you're in the park, there's the greenery and the green space and the open spaces for that. And that's good for gatherings. But if you wanted to do things in a linear fashion, like running or riding a bike or even just walking sometimes in a wide open space, JFK is ideal for that. And they already have, as you know, they already do a lot of closures during the year for different JFK events and Sunday streets. So there's this feeling kind of that generally people want to use the park more for these different things. With that said, vehicular traffic is complicated by that, right? So if you're asking for east-west cut throughs through the park, I think the general sense is we're trying to reduce the amount of vehicular traffic. And it might be that, I'm not sure, but it might be the extreme case. And one of the cases would be the east side access road is going to be Stanyon and the west side access is going to be Great Highway. And it might just close off everything. I don't know, sorry, but that would be the very extreme case if they said, we're trying to restrict vehicular access. I actually think that on the west side, there is that, you go in by the windmill and then you can exit by the other windmill. So I think that one will still be open, but I don't know about the east side. So, but that's my general sense. The idea is to say, hey, this park is public space. This road is public space. We see a lot of people using it in a non-vehicular fashion. It's more fun. It has a lot of more options. For example, just throwing this out there, I have a 6-year-old. He rides his bike. Riding like on the pathways to the park, not that easy with a 6-year-old, but riding with your kid on JFK, piece of cake. There's like plenty of space, safe, easy. So that's just one example. So I hope that helps. I think there's still a lot of access to the park, but going through the park I think the idea is like, you might have to take 19th, might have to take Stanyon, might have to take Great Highway.
Because Albert, I think our discussion at our last meeting was, how do you get north-south? How do you cut across the park? Not so much drive through JFK.
Yeah, so Paula,
I thought that's what a lot of the concerns were.
Well, I'm going to maybe interject with my own opinion here. What I see is that having Adrian, the idea of the extreme measure where it's like our only options are to drive either Great Highway or Stanyon, or possibly the route through 19th Avenue. That's going to really clog up traffic. And we know how it's like already. Like we just got through outside lands and most of the park was closed down and we really had a lot of traffic problems. And so if that was something that was going to happen on a permanent basis, it seems a little bit unfair, in my opinion, that, one group gets to have everything, excluding the other. There has to be some sort of a reasonable middle ground that we can continue. One thing I thought of, Adrian, you make a very good point. It is easier to ride a bicycle, especially with a little one or with a group, riding side by side abreast on a roadway. And I've done that and it's desirable. I'm just kind of wondering, can we alter the landscape? I mean, this is a proposal I'm putting out, is that can we alter part of the landscape that's out there already? Like maybe those bike pathways can be widened so that you can have cars riding, because people do need to get through. That is a 2-mile obstacle, Golden Gate Park, for people wanting to traverse north and south. And the city does need to run. At the same time, people do, totally understand the need for the green space, just like Central Park in New York. So if we can widen some of those paths or create, some sort of features inside the existing landscape that's there, I think there could be room for, both needs. Thank you. Adrian, your hand's up. So do you have a response for that?
I do, Albert, and I really appreciate the way you presented the challenge. So my kid biking was just one example. Like there's other things that people need for wide space. But I mean, what's cool about it is, number one, you mentioned Central Park, and I think a lot of people feel like Golden Gate Park is the Central Park of San Francisco, and it's cool. It's a cool parallel. The thing that's different though is that San Franciscans are a lot more outspoken than New Yorkers, especially in the democracy and the government. And it's something that I love as part of my job. So I will say this: the moment we've talked about widening bike paths, there's an entire community and constituency that is all about public open space and rec park supporters. And if you start telling them, hey, we're going to pave a little wider into the green space, into the lawn, they come back and they're like, yo, what do you, hold on. This is nature. This is our open space. We don't want more concrete, more asphalt in our green space, And as a transportation person, I respect that, because transportation is everywhere. I mean, the nature of being a city is concrete and asphalt, right? That's what we're used to. So that Central Park, that green space of Golden Gate Park, it is also sacred. So it's hard to push back on the supporters of that to say, oh, we should widen these. That's just, again, and that bike riding was just one example. As I was a lot of people don't have 6-year-olds, people riding bikes, but I appreciate that a lot. I think the idea for circulation is supposed to be the main thoroughfares that we already have. If your goal is to get to Richmond, I think we have a major thoroughfare in the middle of the park that's supposed to service that. 19th Street is a challenge. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna lie. 19th Street is crazy trafficy. And again, let me caveat this by saying I'm a biker programmer. I don't work on 19th Street. 19th Street is actually a state highway, which even complicates the jurisdiction even more. So I can't answer for all the sins of MTA and all the transportation planning before me, but I want to say that I empathize with the needs of this group of people, what people are saying, the need to transverse from Sunset to Richmond. I get that. I'm just here because especially, and I put the email for Chris Kidd in the chat. Please email him with your concerns, or like Samantha said, please do the survey. Samantha, I'm still wondering what you think about the survey. I see you on there. I'm very curious how you feel about the options. But with that said, all I can do is present some of the ideology that is supposed to be guiding the idea. And it's that there's roadways in the park, and people want to use them for recreation, not just for cars. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian. Luke Bornheimer, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Albert, I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to chime in about if my understanding is correctly, the question was about north-south options through the park, not necessarily east-west.
Yes. North.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for north-south, you've got Crossover Drive, Transverse, and Chain of Lakes all go through the park, and then Stanyon and Great Highway are on each side of the park. So those are the primary options there. And then just to make it very clear for everyone, because I know it can be really confusing with this project and this program, the extent of the JFK part of the project is simply from Transverse to Kezar. So nothing west of Transverse, and Transverse is unaffected by the proposed project. And then as far as east-west through the park, MLK is still an option, and JFK west of Transverse, and Nancy Pelosi. So just want to make sure that everyone knows about that, because I know that sometimes there's confusion about, is this the entirety of JFK? Is this the whole park going car-free? In fact, it's far less than even 20% of the roads in the park.
Okay.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Luke, for the clarity there. I wish we had a map here today, but unfortunately we do not. but there is the link, so that's good. Anyway, is there any other questions on this subject? All right. I would like to go ahead and move. Oh,
I
sorry,
had
David.
one-
David
I had
Wong.
one question, Amber. What's the deadline for submitting the survey?
Samantha, would you know?
It's November 27th, I believe.
Thanksgiving, Paula. Okay, David Wong, you have a question.
Yeah, so just a quick question in regards to going north and south via, going through Golden Gate Park. Was there outside of, I guess, I don't know, was this drop off or the museum or the bus going both ways? Is that the only reason why regular traffic cannot go through? I mean, I'm just thinking if people want to still go through north and south. I mean, I grew up here, so I've been here living in this place since 1971. So I just knew all the open space and everything. I know things have changed, but that was my go-to way all the time of going through the park, of going from here to Sunset until, I don't know, a few years ago or however long the new museums were put in place, and they kind of stopped that. But because of all the closures now surrounding it, and if we're saying people could go through 8th Avenue and make a right but not a left, why can't the traffic go across the way they used to?
I think those things can be addressed.
So I don't know if anybody could answer that. That's just my question of like, well, why can't we just start doing that again?
Yeah, I would just say, like, go ahead and look into the project proposals, and then you can put in all of your feedback that you have into that. And you can also reach out to your district supervisor if you have other concerns. I know that he has reps who are working closely with MTA and Rec Park.
Okay.
Great.
Hey, David.
Yeah,
David,
I think that,
what your
sorry,
question
go
was
ahead.
about? Your question was about 8th to Music Concourse, that transition. So like
Yeah.
Music Concourse,
Yeah,
right on.
like you're going
JFK
to the
left on-
museum, past the Japanese tea garden. I mean, that used to be my go-to way, for years, right? Until they closed it all off to local traffic. Wondering why can't we open that back up again for traffic? If we're going to let people go into 8th and make a right but not left, why can't we just go straight across instead of trying to, go the long way around, trying to just get to the other side of the park?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the 8th. So from Fulton side, from the Richmond side, 8th to JFK to Music Concourse, there's a number of issues that's actually in no way settled as like that's going to happen. There's actually Prop J, which was voted and put in place by voters, actually made it illegal for there to be a left turn from JFK on the Music Concourse. So there's actually a legality issue of that, not to mention the fact that you're putting cut-through traffic through a promenade. So those are the big issues there. The other one is that the 44 has sped up by 10 minutes in total for its whole length, and up to 4 minutes in just the park segment of the 44's route. And so by putting cut-through traffic back on that segment, you would not only be putting children, people with disabilities, and everyone else at risk in the promenade space, but you would also be most definitely slowing down the 44, which is obviously not something that we want to be doing if we want people to be, using the bus.
Going down what? 44?
Yes, yeah, the 44 is running 10 minutes faster since the
44.
current configuration, and 4 minutes faster from between Lincoln and Fulton. So you would see that speed up, that savings of time taken away, and probably actually slow down the bus even more with cut through traffic. And again, there's also the legality issue of coming from the Richmond and taking a left on the Music Concourse. And maybe the most important part, which is like if you have a promenade space, having vehicular cut through traffic through that space is like, obviously a terrible idea for making a promenade space actually enjoyable and peaceful. So those are the main reasons why that cut through option is not being proposed.
And this is right at going from 8th Ave. Like if you're coming from the Richmond to the Sunset, that'd be from 8th Avenue going through to 9th.
Correct.
Yeah, so the Richmond to the Sunset option is actually not legal by Prop J, by what the voters voted in. It very specifically said you could not cut in at 8th and onto JFK, take a left onto Music Concourse.
Yeah.
Going in the other direction, I don't think it's specified in Prop J, but would cause the same issues with the 44, as well as, you know, safety issues for the promenade. You know, safety, noise, air pollution problems, and just encouraging cut-through traffic through a park.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
I'd like to bring up 2 points, if you guys don't mind.
Get it faster, Matthew, okay? We need to, we're cutting on the time, but yeah, go ahead.
One is commute traffic, you know, people's ability to get to and from work. So I've noticed since the park's been closed, the commutes have been crazy, you know, especially down by the beach and then cutting across, and people getting from the Sunset to the Richmond takes so much longer now. And then you mentioned
Matthew, is your commute to the Richmond? Is that right?
I drive all over for work. So I drive all through the city, and just cutting across from the Richmond and getting back, or even getting from Sloat to the Richmond takes forever now. And
but your work is kind of unique in that your commute is all over the city, right?
I have no idea. I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about what I see every day when I'm out and about.
It's just, you're just saying it's back to back traffic. It's bumper to bumper.
It's bumper to bumper traffic in the outer Sunset and the outer Richmond. And, you know, a lot of people live out in these areas is because they don't want to deal with a lot of the problems that you have to deal with the city weren't out here, and people really appreciated that, you know?
Like you could go place fast, you mean?
You could go somewhere without sitting in traffic.
Yeah,
People
quickly.
don't want to spend their lives. People hate sitting in traffic. People don't want to
Yeah,
spend
for sure.
their valuable life seconds sitting in traffic when you're going to die one day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's profound. That's deep, Matthew. That's deep.
Spend any more of my life sitting in traffic.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, driving is stressful. Like, putting people in a car, making them drive, it's stressful for sure.
Yeah, and then another thing is some of these street closures. Someone mentioned safety, and the bus thing and the bus commute thing, that makes total sense for me. If we have public transportation and it's making public transportation more efficient, and it's making things safe for people, that's great. But some of these closures make things less efficient and more dangerous.
So Matthew, it sounds like you would support like a dedicated rail line up 19th so you could get all over. But you know,
hold on, can I finish talking? So some of the closures make things more dangerous, you know, like the Great Highway closure has made the lower Great Highway, 48th, 47th, and 46th more dangerous. So the whole safe street thing by closing streets doesn't always add up, you know?
Okay.
So some of the things I just want to, like, some of the ideas are great, but also do they work? You know, is something I'm concerned about.
All right.
Yeah,
Matt, guys, I'm going to thank you for that input, Matthew. Those are well pointed out, you know, considerations. I would say to go ahead and put those opinions and make them in an official manner in the surveys, because I think SFMTA and the park, Rec and Park, and all those guys are looking at it. But in any case, I would like to move on, because I know the next guest, I think many of you have come to see today. Our San Francisco District Attorney has been so kind to come to our meeting today, Mr. Chesa Boudin. And I do want to say that I know that there's going to be a lot of questions asked. I would like to ask Mr. Boudin to, you know, talk about his approach to, you know, prosecution and being the District Attorney of San Francisco. At the same time, people do be respectful of you know, like making your opinions, and I will mute if there's things that get out of hand. Okay, so just be forewarned. And with that said, ground rules made, I would like to introduce District Attorney Chesa Boudin.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much, Albert. It's great to be with all of you and great to hear such a lively discussion about traffic and safe streets and commuter issues that affect all of us in the Outer Sunset. I'm a longtime resident of the Outer Sunset, and I am proudly wearing my t-shirt, my Parkside t-shirt tonight to the event. I love so many of the shops and parks and areas that we've been discussing tonight. And I know a lot of my staff do as well. So before I jump in, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge some of the folks who are here with us tonight from my office. We have Ronnie Singh, who has been a manager in the office for many, many years. Before that, an extraordinary trial lawyer. And of course, her parents are well known to all of you. Additionally with us tonight is Cecily Brewster, who had been in the office before my tenure, and we were able to recruit her back as an assistant district attorney, and now she's overseeing our community liaison work. And then two new hires I brought in because of a commitment I made to expand our community engagement, particularly in the AAPI community, and to have more linguistically fluent and culturally competent staff members who understand the particular challenges of San Francisco's diverse communities and Chinese community. We have Francis Chan and Kitty Fong. So all of those folks are with us tonight. You see them waving. I hope that you'll get to know them both tonight and over the course of the months and years ahead as we work together to make San Francisco safer than ever. With that, let me just start very briefly and acknowledge something that I think we're all really well aware of, is that the last 2 years have been really horrific for all of us, personally, professionally. We have faced challenges that we never anticipated as a city, as families, as individuals. We've had to rise to the challenge. We've had to work really hard to create silver linings in the midst of so much anxiety and fear and social upheaval because of COVID-19 and all that has brought with it for our city. One of the things that I notice all the time when I walk around the neighborhood or other parts of San Francisco with my wife and our now 2-month-old son is that the streets just don't feel like they have the same energy they used to a couple of years ago. They feel almost empty in a lot of parts of the city. And a lot of stores are closed. A lot of businesses haven't fully reopened. We don't have the same energy around tourism or people enjoying all of the great sites that we have around San Francisco. And it means that not only are the streets quieter and feel more abandoned, but it means that the folks who are unhoused, the folks who are living on the street, who are living in many instances in bus stops or in the parks, are much more visible. And for many folks, that can lead them to feel unsafe when there's nobody else on the street, when all they're seeing is folks who are unhoused. It can lead to a perception of increased crime or decreased public safety. And of course, across the country, we are seeing an increase in crime, especially violent crime, especially gun violence. We're seeing that across the country. San Francisco has done so unbelievably well as a city over the last 2 years. I want to start by congratulating all of you for making it through the pandemic, for having businesses that are still open, for having a city that has one of the highest vaccination rates and lowest COVID transmission rates in the country. And we also have a lot to be proud of when it comes to public safety. Absolutely true that some categories of crime have gone up, and those we're working on every single day. Overall, when you compare San Francisco to Oakland or to other major cities in California and across the country, we are crushing it when it comes to crime. Overall, crime rates are down in both violent and nonviolent categories since the beginning of 2020, and they're down by double digits. In addition, we're seeing increased coordination between the police department, the district attorney's office, and other law enforcement agencies like parole and the Department of Corrections in ways that were never, ever done before. And so we're finding ways to increase efficiency and communication and to channel resources into those areas that have seen increases in crime. We're also being more efficient with our resources in that we're investing in treating root causes of crime. We're doing things that Ronnie Singh has been an expert in for many years, like expanding resources for young adult court or mental health diversion or veterans court. We're also ensuring that our victim advocates speak the languages of San Francisco. And so we're hiring more victim advocates than the office has ever had. so that we can communicate with those who've been harmed in the language that they speak and meet them where they're at. Those are just a couple of the things that we've been focusing on. And I know that a lot of the other initiatives and questions that you all have will give me and my team an opportunity to dig further into the details. Let me just end by saying that we are committed to making policies that prioritize public safety and justice based on data and empirical evidence. And sadly, what we see a lot in social media and on Nextdoor is individual videos of high profile crimes that are tremendously scary, but that are not representative of the overall trend. And I'll share with you over the course of this evening, statistics and data that show we are doing exactly what I promised when I ran for district attorney in 2019. We are prioritizing serious and violent crimes. We are centering crime victims and investing more resources in healing and supporting those that have been harmed by crime. And we are focusing on treating and addressing root causes of crime so that we can more effectively break the cycle of crime, recidivism, and incarceration. And we are doing all of that with success that can be measured in concrete numbers. Data and evidence that often does not make it into the headlines because it's not sexy and because it's not dramatic, not able to compete with the viral videos, but I insist that our policies in this city of all cities must be driven by data and empirical evidence. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished as a team in the face of historic obstacles over the last 2 years. Let me stop there and open up for questions. And depending on the questions folks have, I'll encourage different members of my staff to jump in as well.
Okay. All right, everybody, here's your chance to ask Chesa Boudin some questions. I'm sure some people have had curious things to pose to him.
I have a question.
Grace?
Hi, my name is Grace Garza, and I work on Terrible Street. And Mr. Boudin, I had heard today that you had hired a career public defender by the name of Rebecca Young, along with another career public defender by the name of Eric Corinth, I think it was, to expressly prosecute cops. So I was wondering if you could speak on that. And I'm also wondering if maybe we should be aligning better with our police in order
Grace,
to.
Yeah, thanks so much for your quick question, Grace. Rebecca Young has not started in our office yet. Eric Quant has started in the office. And yes, there's a unit in the district attorney's office that predates me. I wish I could claim credit for it. But it was created under DA Gascon and under the leadership of then President of the Board of Supervisors, Malia Cohen. It's a unit known as the Independent Investigation Bureau, IIB. And that unit is funded by the Board of Supervisors and the mayor with the express and sole purpose of investigating and prosecuting police use of force cases. So yes, that unit predates me. It's generally staffed with about 5 lawyers and a number of investigators and paralegals. It has a funding stream that's totally separate from the rest of our office's budget. And we are only allowed to use that money to hire lawyers who will investigate and prosecute police misconduct or excessive use of force.
Right.
I would like to pose questions that have been in the newspaper lately. And I just wanted to see, how would you like to respond to that? Recently in the Chronicle, there was a one of your district attorneys, Brooke Jenkins, and I think one other that had quit your staff, along with many other district attorneys, and they're jumping onto the recall campaign, and I wanted to see how that's affected maybe your point of view or your perspective about why they're leaving, and also have you changed your game plan in any way? The other second question I wanted to pose to you was the comments that were made by Superior Court Judge Bruce Chan about the lack of professionalism or unpreparedness in the courtroom that was commented in open court and was reported in the Chronicle a couple of weeks back. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Albert. With regard to the first question, I was disappointed to see the dishonesty, both in the article the Chronicle published and in the statements that were made by those two assistant district attorneys. As is always true with these things, the details matter a lot. And, in the particular case that Ms. Jenkins was upset about, what was missing from that article, and that's critical context, is that almost the entire family of the victim, with only one exception, were begging our office, were demanding of our office that we send the man who committed the murder to the state hospital for psychiatric treatment in a locked facility. And Ms. Jenkins wanted to send this young man to prison for life, despite the wishes of the family. Now, when she came to me and explained her position, I had my doubts. And the reason I had my doubts is because 3 separate medical experts, 2 of whom had been appointed by the court, not hired by any side, but court appointed, had said that he was so severely mentally ill as to be not guilty by reason of insanity. Ms. Jenkins, without consulting me or seeking my approval, spent $40,000 of taxpayer money to hire an expert to disagree with those 3 and to say that no, though this man is severely mentally ill, he is still, or was at the time of the crime, still sufficiently aware of what he was doing as to warrant a life sentence in state prison. Again, in disregard, total disregard of what the family of the victim were asking for in this case. So I was frustrated that had happened, but nevertheless, I deferred to her as a trial lawyer, and I let her go ahead and present evidence of sanity or lack thereof to the jury. And 7 of those jurors came back and said they believed that he was insane. 5 of them said they thought he was sane. And so at the conclusion of that trial, after Ms. Jenkins had an opportunity to present all of the evidence to the jury, and 7 of them agreed with what the family was asking for, agreed with what all of the independent experts had determined, I said that I was also persuaded. And I thought we should listen to the victim's family, and we should agree, as they were asking us to, as they were demanding of us, that the young man who committed the murder spend potentially the rest of his life in a state hospital. That's not what was discussed in the Chronicle, and that's not the way that it's been talked about in the press. And I'm sorry that those facts and those details got lost. With regard to Mr. Dubain, he was upset and resigned over a case where he wanted to send someone to prison for a very, very long time. And I authorized him to seek a sentence of up to 21 years in state prison. That wasn't enough for him. And so he quit. And we can argue about whether or not 21 years is long enough in a particular case, but to suggest that 21 years is not a severe punishment, it simply ignores the facts. And that's what happened in that article. And I'm sorry to see that the conversation around policy and sentencing has become so politicized as for people to lie and say that we refuse to send people to prison when in fact I authorized a 21-year sentence. It's simply disconnected from reality. And it's really frustrating to see that level of misrepresentation being published in the Chronicle without fact checking, without diving into the details, or without independent analysis of what's actually going on in those cases. Similarly, in the case that Judge Chan went on the record about, what he had to say in that case had nothing to do with the case itself. And instead, what he did was he injected himself into a political process in a way that's in direct violation of all of the judicial canons. What he did is unethical, and it politicized the court. It dragged the entire Superior Court into local politics in ways that are explicitly prohibited for judges. What's even more frustrating is that Judge Chan lied. You know what? He lied in what he said on the record. The transcript says that what he says in that transcript is that he's making this record in the forlorn hopes that somebody in management in my office will pay attention. But here's the thing, he never reached out to anybody in management with any of his concerns. Not to me, not to any of my chiefs, not to any of my managers in writing to say that he had concerns. And so to suggest on the record, as he did, that he doesn't think anyone in management is paying attention is a lie. And it's a lie that's unethical. And it's for that reason that he called me and apologized for what he had done, because he knew that he crossed an ethical line. He knew that what he said was out of pocket and out of turn. And whatever his particular issues may be with young trial attorneys in my office, there are channels and mechanisms for him and other judges to reach out to me and supervising attorneys, and it happens all the time. You can ask Ronnie Singh, who's been a supervising attorney in our office for many years. We have an open door policy. Many judges in the courthouse have my cell phone. They all have my email. And when they have concerns or questions or suggestions, they can reach out to us about particular attorneys that need more training. They can reach out to us about particular issues in our office where we need more professional development. And we are more than happy to engage and to respond to that critical feedback. He chose instead to engage in a political process in direct violation of the judicial canon.
All right, thank you. I am looking at Josephine Zhao. She has her hand raised. Josephine?
Yes, I think that there are people in the waiting room waiting to be admitted. Yes.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Chesa and DA and your office for coming to our meeting. It's good to hear you directly. There's so many things going on in the media, like you said, social media, so many controversies. And I have met you in person about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. I was mesmerized by you, and I still do. And I really think that, you know, everyone, most of our city really would like to see mass incarceration to not happen. We would like to shorten the struggle and misery of people that are jailed, that they're ready to come out to live with us. We are all ready to receive them when they are ready. However, what we are feeling, at least personally, you know, I don't know about the statistics. The statistics may say one thing, the viral videos may say another thing, but personal experience, I'm not feeling safe. My neighbors at the end of the block, their garage was broken into while they were sleeping upstairs. And my car was broken into parked in front of my driveway. And their friends, you know, like all the stores are closing in big, and we see some of the, you know, shoplifting done right in the open in some neighborhood drugstores. And then there's a carjacking that took place in broad daylight in Sunset against a Chinese man. There are countless Asian hate crime targeting us. We don't feel safe. And I don't really know what the problem is. Maybe the police. Last time when you said the police arrest rate was 8% or something like that, or the, you know, but then when we asked police chief, he said differently. He had a different argument or something. You know, I'm not an expert, so I can't really say. But anyways, it doesn't matter whose fault it is that are not doing the work. And I'm not here to say whose fault it is. I'm just showing you, telling you our personal experience that we are not feeling safe. And you're in the power, you're in the position of power. You have the best way to affect changes. And I'm okay with ending mass incarceration, but I'm not okay with opening the door and letting everybody out when they're not ready. I'm not okay with, even if it's before your time, ending the juvenile hall, like without a alternative option in place before closing it down. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with letting people off when they did not go through a process. I'm not okay with I'm not okay with letting like victimless crimes off the hook. I'm not okay with letting shoplifting and raiding of our stores to happen and take place without consequence. I don't know whom else I can turn to. I'm not okay with some of the shop owners saying that they see shoplifters come back within a week. I'm not okay with one of our merchant on Terraville being broken into 3 times in a year. and I'm not okay with not feeling safe, and you are in the position of power, you need to do something to change the whole thing. While we are doing justice reform, we need to keep the public safety up on your priority as well.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Josephine, let me respond because you raised a lot of really important points, and I totally agree with virtually everything you just said. And certainly, I agree 100% that public safety is a priority, and people need to not only be safe, they also need to feel safe. And I hear from other people who aren't feeling safe, as you just expressed, and there's nothing more difficult and more painful for me to hear than that my neighbors and community members don't feel safe in our own community. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons why people don't feel safe, and I think we should talk about that. I also think, as I said earlier, it's essential that we look at data and that we look at empirical evidence, because there are a lot of factors in what we can do. As you say, I'm in a position of power, I'm in a position to change things, and we're working hard to do that. And I'll give you a few examples of things that we're doing. I also want to make sure everybody understands how the process works. This isn't about blame. It's about simply understanding how the criminal justice system works, because there's a lot of different agencies that all have to work together in order for things to work. Whatever that means for you, in order for someone to be held accountable, in order for someone to be prosecuted, in order for someone to be rehabilitated, in order for someone to successfully re-enter and join the community in a way that's safe. There's a lot of agencies that work. So let me start a little bit sort of at the beginning of the process and just talk folks through how a traditional case works. Let's take, for example, Josephine, you mentioned shoplifting. So let's take shoplifting. If someone goes into a store and steals, the merchant who owns that store calls the police and reports it. Now, if that happens, it shows up in police data about overall crime rates. Some percentage of reported crimes will end up resulting in an arrest. In other words, the San Francisco Police Department is the primary investigating agency for all reported crimes in San Francisco, with very few exceptions. And so we can look at the San Francisco Police Department data and we can see, well, what percentage of which categories of crime are they solving? Are they clearing? And when a case gets solved or cleared, it almost always gets presented to my office for consideration of charges. But if it doesn't get solved, if it doesn't get cleared by the police, then even though the merchant reported the crime, even if it's the second or third time that merchant has reported a crime, it never comes to our attention. So I'm putting in a link, and this is not my data. This is the San Francisco Police Department's own data dashboard. And what you can see is that in the last year, if you compare year to date with 2020, theft or shoplifting is resulting in arrests only 2.4% of the time. In other words, in about 98% of reported thefts, there's no arrest that's ever made. This isn't a criticism of the police. This is an objective fact. This is their own data. Why that's the case, I think there's a lot of questions. We can ask Chief Scott, we can ask local precinct captains. We can also look at the fact that police are prioritizing other kinds of crime that are more serious. And in fact, if you look at things like robbery or assault, they have much higher clearance rates. It's true that about 80% of people who commit a robbery still get away with it. In other words, they're not arrested. But police are making arrests at a rate that's 10 times higher for robberies than they are for thefts. In other words, they're prioritizing the more serious and violent crimes. And I think that's something we can all agree they should do. So there are a lot of factors that go into this. But what's important to remember is before I get a chance to file criminal charges, to ask a court to hold someone in jail or impose a sentence, they need to make an arrest in the first place. And since I took office, the police have presented us with a historically low number of new arrests. In other words, I've been in office less than 2 years. There is no comparable time period in modern San Francisco history when the police department has brought as few cases for possible prosecution as they brought to me. Now, one reason is that reported crime is way down. Another reason is that it's really hard for police to make arrests when people are wearing masks. Another factor is the pandemic led judges to release people from jail much more quickly. There have been changes in state law. All of those things are factors. This isn't about the blame game. It's about recognizing that we're all operating, no matter how powerful we may be or we would like to be, we're all operating in the context of a really complicated and dynamic bureaucracy that involves multiple different agents. I want to share another link with you, and that's an article from the Chronicle today that looks at crime charging rates under my administration and in prior administrations. And I'll just point out that one of the things that's missing entirely from this article is any analysis of the role of COVID-19, for example, or any longer term trends that might be really important to see, because things change. Crime trends change. Some crimes go up, others go down. And in the context of COVID-19, we saw a dramatic change in crime trends in San Francisco. Auto burglaries fell by about 40%. In turn, unfortunately, and really scarily, residential burglaries and commercial burglaries went up. And so the police department and my office have been redirecting our resources. Now, what you'll see if you look at the link I just shared is that, as the Chronicle points out, I've significantly increased charging rates for things like rape and murder, the most serious crimes with the most serious consequences. We've also continued to prosecute other cases that the police bring to us, but we were limited in our ability to do that by the courts. I want to give Ronnie a chance to weigh in here and just talk about what she sees at the ground level, because Ronnie oversees a team of really hardworking entry-level prosecutors who are prosecuting the kind of quality of life offenses that you asked about, Josephine. And for example, shoplifting or drunk driving. You mentioned, so-called victimless crimes, crimes where there's no named victim in the case, right? Those are often the cases that Ronnie's team is prosecuting. And I can tell you, and she can tell you in more detail, that over the last 2 years, the courts have not allowed us to do jury trials because of COVID-19. It's been probably the period in any of our lifetimes when the court has allowed the fewest number of jury trials. And that's a massive limiting factor in our ability to secure criminal convictions, to ensure that people who are accused of crimes are being held accountable, are complying with terms of diversion or other treatment and the like. So Ronnie, if you're here still, could you share a little bit about what it's been like in the courtroom for those sort of street level and quality of life offenses for your team?
Hi. And for those of you who know, I was at basketball practice with my daughter, and that's concluded. So I'm in the middle of making dinner, but I'm going to put that on pause so that I can answer that question. So it's actually interesting. We have the highest caseload in misdemeanors. So I can't speak to some of the violent offenses that people have been talking about. And thank you so much, Josephine, for all those very, very important questions. And I've known Josephine for quite some time, and she's a very active community advocate. So I think it's very important. And let me just start by saying one thing. And I know, we talk a lot about, politics and political theory and all those things, but I just want to talk about public safety because that's what we're here for. A lot of times public safety issues do get mixed in with politics. And as many of you know, I'm not here tonight. I've been here for 23 years. I grew up in the Sunset. I was born and raised in the Sunset. My parents still live in the Sunset. My daughter goes to school in the Sunset. So I'm a community liaison because I care about the city. I care about the district attorney's office, and I'm a career prosecutor. We have faced unprecedented difficulty, but interestingly enough, the backlog on violent cases has been much more significant because they're much more serious and difficult to send out to trial. But we did not start trying cases. I took over the misdemeanor unit in August of 2020, and we were deep into COVID. And we were not even able to start trials until April of this year. And my team, which is kind of the little engine that could, we have 11 lawyers and we have 1,700 cases. So we have the largest trial unit pretty much in the office with the newest lawyers. And they were off and running as soon as we were able to try cases. We have actually tried the most cases in the entire office by number and have had very successful results. So I know a lot of times people think quality of life crimes are not as serious. And so therefore courts don't take them seriously, juries don't take them seriously. But in districts like this, I actually find that quality of life crimes oftentimes are of great importance because these are things that affect everybody's everyday life. And so I can tell you right now, we have 2 cases in trial, and both of them are misdemeanor assaults. One of them was a person who was throwing, believe it or not, eggs at patrons at a parklet and was harassing patrons, harassing the business owner, and was relentless for weeks. And so that's one of the cases that are in trial. The second case that's in trial is a case where a very irate customer was very abusive with an elderly shop owner, a small business owner like many of you, and pushed the elderly gentleman to the ground. So I know it is very difficult to talk about politics and policies, statistics and data, but the reality is that I have 11 lawyers who work day and night to create a public safety net for many of the quality life crimes that we see every day in the Sunset. So I can be available for specific questions, but I always say this: don't ever shy away from a tough question. Don't ever shy away from a comment that you think is going to be offensive. We are here for you. We are public servants. This is not something that we do because it's fun. It's difficult. It is very, very hard. And I know that the DA has only been in this job for 2 years, but I can tell you, I've been in it for 23. And it is because we're dedicated to the proposition of being public safety agents for the entire city and county of San Francisco that we do this job. So that's just an example of kind of what's going on. We had 197 case backlog, and we do not have a backlog in misdemeanors anymore. We have resolved every case and tried every case that we have in trial. And the only cases that we are now awaiting are some of these violent cases where the individuals are a violent offense or they're in custody, and we're waiting our turn, and we are in line, and we are ready to be committed to public safety and go to trial if necessary, resolve cases that can be resolved, give services to those who need it, and hold people accountable. But there are many ways to skin the cat, for lack of a better term. For those of you who are cat lovers, I do have a dog, so I don't want to be offensive. But for those of you who know the term, there are so many different tools in the tool chest to be able to resolve cases. But again, I know it is hard when what you see outside makes you feel unsafe. Many of you know my parents live on 23rd Avenue. 2 years ago, my father asked somebody to pick up feces, and they punched my father out, and he's 83 years old. We never caught the guy. My father's lived there 57 years. Great investigation from SFPD. It predates this district attorney, but I am not only somebody who promotes public safety, I'm somebody who believes in public safety. I have been a victim of crime. I was robbed when I was 16 at Lay Video. For those of you who remember when Lay Video was in the Sunset, I prosecute crime. I've been a witness to crime. My family have been victims of crime. So I've lived in every aspect. I can say that when you have personal experience, it's very difficult to talk about these things. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we have this open forum and that we're all very conscious of the fact that we are not always going to do the right thing, in the sense of we're going to make mistakes. We're all humans, but we're going to keep on trying, and we are going to keep on being there for this community so that we can get things done to make our entire community feel safe.
Thanks, Ronnie. And just to emphasize one point, she was talking about the 2 misdemeanor trials that are out right now. We have a number of other cases that are not under her leadership that are also in trial. We have 2 murder cases in trial, both of which occurred before I was even in office. So we're working hard to bring serious cases to resolution, to make sure that there is closure for the families that have been impacted by these crimes, to make sure that the people accused are able to have due process in their day in court, and to make sure that we're clearing a backlog of cases that we inherited and which sadly has gotten worse in the context of the pandemic. I know there's other questions, and I'm excited to continue the conversation. We were only scheduled to go until 8, and I do have other commitments tonight. So I'm going to have to come back. And the question in the box, we filed charges against Jamaica Hampton. He's facing pending charges right now. We refiled those charges once the investigation was completed and all the evidence could be presented to a grand jury. I see there's a lot of other questions. I'm obviously eager to answer them as I'm trying to do, but I am late for another commitment. I look forward to coming back and continuing the conversation. Albert, I hope we can do that soon. And I hope that sooner than later we can do it in person. I want to thank all of you, in the Parkside and in the Sunset for coming together, for being such a vibrant community, for being the community that I call home, for being my neighbors. As Ronnie said, this is the place that we live and raise our families. This is the place that we form memories and build bonds with each other. And so we've got to do everything in our power to make sure that it is safe and that it feels safe for all of us. Thank you so much. And thanks.
Chesa, why don't you ever answer any of my questions? Why don't you ever answer any of my questions?
I do. When you email me, I've always answered your emails, Leona. Every email you've sent me, I've answered, and we've had multiple meetings on Zoom where you asked me about specific cases, and I went through each and every one of those cases with you in detail and told you if they'd been presented to our office, and if so, what actions we'd taken. So if
You
have
have dropped the
questions-
charges in many of these cases.
No, Leona, if you
What
have,
happened with Jerome Mallory? What happened with Rung Shin Liu?
feel free to send me an email, Leona. And I know there's other people who also had their hands up, so I want to be respectful of the folks who had questions first. And like I said, I'm happy to come back when we have more time on the agenda, but we're well past my spot, and I want to be respectful of the other things on the agenda tonight. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Lisa, I'll discuss with you off off the meeting. We'll talk about rescheduling you maybe early next year.
That sounds good. I look forward to it. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and see you soon.
Okay, thank you, Chesa. Thank you for coming.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, Andy, I didn't get to you. He was running out of time.
And Albert, I put my email in the chat, and then Leanna and Josephine, I'm going to send you my direct email and my phone number if you guys want me to follow up on any of the cases, even if they're not in my unit. I'm happy to check for you.
Okay, Ronnie, can you stay on for 1 second? Let me have.
I'm going to stay on for the whole meeting as long as you're okay with me cooking my daughter some pasta.
Okay.
I'm here for the long haul, so don't worry. I can wait till the end if people want to ask me anything. More than this is my club. This is my group. I'm not here just for right now. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. I want to just, Andy's a very significant community member as well, owns a couple of businesses in the Sunset. And he's had his hand raised. I'd like to let him pose a question, and then Neal Patel, we'll get to your lift right after that. Thank you for waiting for so long. Go ahead, Andy.
Thanks for putting this together. I just had a quick question. What are we supposed to do when we see a crime being repeated pretty much 5 or 6 times a week, and we report it and nothing happens? And I think what happens now is that the criminals know that they won't get in trouble, so they continue to do it. And talking to the police officers on site, they just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, we have a no chase policy set into place. We know exactly what they do. We see it every day, and obviously it's not changing. And I'm just curious as to what step we can take next. I went to South Africa, where there's probably some of the worst crime in the world. And what the local surfers have done there is they hired people to walk around the parking lots with bats. They don't have any crime in those parking lots. Not a single car has been broken into in the course of 5 years. So I'm just curious, what suggestions do you have? Because obviously nothing's working. The criminals know they're not getting in trouble. They're going to continue breaking into cars. What are we supposed to do?
Is that question for me? I'm assuming that's question for me because there's no police department personnel. So so are we talking about cases where the person does the theft and then by the time the police come, they are gone, and you're actually witnessing it and calling 911?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I mean,
and then let me ask you, is it Andy? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first name.
No, it's okay.
Andy, so give me an example. So if you're calling the cops and they come out, are they taking a police report?
Yeah, they'll do it all the whole process.
are they doing any CSI work? I'm just curious because some of this stuff falls in the felony land. And obviously, because I've been there 23 years, I know the process in felonies and misdemeanors. But that's something that maybe we can talk to Captain Rainford. You know, the other issue is, and I could say a bigger issue. Do you remember maybe a few years back, we were doing some really good burglary abatement, car burglary and car theft abatement, like in Stonestown and sometimes on the Gray Highway. Sometimes those enforcements are really good. And I think because of the staffing issue, they haven't been able to do that as much. But those are things that I think we could definitely bring up with Captain Rainsford, especially if we have targeted areas. I know that there's been a lot of break-ins for the surfers' cars. In fact, one of my friends, St. Gabe's dad, was surfing with his son, who I've known for 15 years. And he said the car got broken into while they were surfing. So this is something that maybe I can look at some of the police reports that have been generated where there's been no arrests, because believe it or not, the statistic a lot of times is there's about like 14% of the people recidivate 86% of the time. It's a really interesting number. And so some of these thefts are actually kind of theft rings. So maybe if we do some targeted enforcement, especially near the Great Highway and some of those areas that have recently hit, because car thefts are way up. And I mean, a lot of you also know, because Prop 47, unfortunately, whether you agree with that legislation or not, what used to be a felony is now considered a wobbler, which means it can be charged as a misdemeanor. So so Andy, the thing you're talking about, and this is for low level cases, this is not about the violent cases that a lot of people have talked about, like Josephine and Leanna brought up a lot of serious cases that have been in the media. But for those low level cases, there is already that inherent non-deterrent by the fact of, because of the low level offense being a misdemeanor now, that a lot of times that in itself becomes very enticing for people who want to commit crime. So why don't we, Andy, I left my email off on the chat and I'll do it again. Why don't we go offline and you can give me an email and I can give a call to Captain Rainsford and see if I can maybe pull some of those police reports and start doing a little bit of analytics to figure out whether we can do some strategy for some preventative measures.
Yeah, cool. I think, what I'm just asking for is like, let's talk about the potential step-by-step plan of a quick little thing we can try and put into place.
Yeah, that's why. So that's what I'm thinking. So what I can do is a lot of times I can do call outs for service based on the locations. Yeah. And then I can pull all the police reports. I could ask Captain Rainsford to do that. I could probably work with the swing lieutenant, Aaron Lozada, who's great and very responsive. So Andy, I'm going to leave my email in the chat. And why don't you give me an email ring, and then we can take it from there.
I will definitely. And then the second part of my question too is being another lifelong Sunset resident, and just kind of a blanketed question. Do you feel that the Sunset is safer than when you were growing up here, or not as safe?
Actually, let me just say something about the whole city.
And not a analytical stat.
Yeah, no. And I don't think, and you know what the problem is? No, I don't think any place is as safe as it used to be. I used to play wall ball on 23rd Avenue near the Chinese restaurant till 9 o'clock at night. I would never let my daughters do that now, but I don't think it's only the Sunset. You know what I'm saying? I think other major cities and other areas, have changed and crime is different. And people have just also generationally, I used to say that there were honor among thieves. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So again, without talking about politics and putting politics aside, because I am a prosecutor who's been a DA for 23 years. I'm not in that category or class of people who have done other things. This has been my life's work. So I have seen, but I also was, hired by a very progressive DA, Terrence Hallinan, who was very, kind of radical for that time, maybe not so radical now, but so I do think in general, and there's also just a lot of people have lost their moral compass. So I think there's a lot of factors. That's a philosophical conversation that I could have coffee over with you, Andy, and I'm sure we could talk about a lot of stuff.
To hear your general thought, but thanks for responding, and I'll shoot you an email, and hopefully we can come up with a. Thanks for.
I'm looking forward to meeting you.
All right. Thank you all. That was a vigorous presentation just now. Okay. Thank you. And I'm sorry for Neal Patel from Lyft. We are running a little bit late, but I thank him for being patient and waiting and understanding. That was a pretty big subject matter that everyone was very interested in hearing. So without any further ado, Neal Patel from Lyft talking about the bicycle racks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your time. I know there's a lot of important neighborhood issues that you all are working on. So I'll be brief and happy to answer any questions. As you saw, I just threw my email address. So I know we are getting late. If you also got kids to feed and need to reach out to me later, feel free to do so. And I'm happy to talk.
Really quick, Neal, do you need to co-host?
I should be able to share. If you're able to, I do have a couple slides that I think just might help to show where some of our proposals are.
You got it. You're co-hosting.
Great. All right. Does the screen look right? Can everyone see this slide?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I just want to talk to you about some exciting plans that we have in the works for the Sunset District. Really just kind of want to inform this neighborhood group on what our plans are. The plans have been kind of in the works for a little over a year now. I dropped my email address. Feel free to reach out, or you can use community@BayWheels. Just to get everyone up to speed real quick, bike share in the Bay Area started in 2013. And Lyft is currently the operator of bike share here in San Francisco, as well as 4 other cities in the Bay Area: San Jose, Oakland, Emeryville, and Berkeley. Bay Wheels and what is bike share? It is a transportation system, just like Muni and just like walking. Bike share is a system where you can get a bike from a station and bike over to another part of the city or another part of your neighborhood and dock it. We have memberships, so a low monthly price can give you unlimited rides in our system. Bike share is really helps to fill that critical last mile gap between BART stations and to get people to destinations. Something that we've heard a lot in the Sunset District is that north-south connections kind of within the Sunset as well as to the park and to the Richmond can be really challenging if you don't have a car. That trip can be completed in 10 minutes or so on a bike, and I think a lot of people have expressed that they're really excited for that. So we currently have over 400 bike share stations across the Bay Area, but none yet in the Sunset. You'll see that many of you have probably seen our e-bikes. So we expanded our service area so that one can ride an e-bike, which is a bike on the left. It's got a little bit of a boost currently in the Sunset. But we don't yet have our classic pedal bikes. And those are the ones that on the right that have to be docked into a station. They're a much more affordable option and something that we're excited to bring to the neighborhood. We sent out a survey to residents in the Sunset just to kind of get a sense of how they typically move around and how often they bike. Found some interesting ideas. There are a lot of folks that walk, that drive, that take a Muni or BART, and many that also use their own personal bike. Not a whole lot of people yet use, according to our survey, use bike share, but there does seem to be some residents, people interested in trying it and learning more about it. Just a little bit of a word cloud of some results when we talked about this. These are just some of the things that came up, and I think our proposed network really reflects this. Looking at some of the recreation areas like Golden Gate Park and the Great Highway, people wanted to see stations there. And then just a lot of the commercial corridors. So Noriega, Irving, Judah, there's a lot of places in Sunset I go to. And I think that people want to be able to access them by other means than a car. This is some of our e-bike data. And this is all the way from 2020, but I bring it up to show, this is where people that are getting bikes, either parking them or grabbing them from. And really what this tells me is that those commercial corridors, people are going to and from a lot of those corridors, to and from their homes. Irving, Noriega, Terraval, Lincoln. So those are some areas that we wanted to prioritize as we were thinking about our station network. So to get to the punchline, our proposed station network is to bring 17 bike share stations to the neighborhood. A lot of these bike share stations would connect north and south. And also get people to the Sunset, Richmond, and Golden Gate Park, as well as to other parts of the city eastwards. This is just a little snapshot into the criteria. So, not every location is a suitable spot for a bike share station. And that picture is an example of a station. We'd like to locate them along commercial corridors and areas that just have destinations. And we'll make sure that they're safe places, places that are well lit, that have a decent amount of foot traffic. And then we can't, put them over manholes or other kind of street utilities. This is the proposed station network that we are currently pursuing in the Sunset District. We started out with 7 to 10 stations proposed for the neighborhood, but in a lot of the early community feedback, we actually heard that folks wanted more. They also wanted to see a lot more along Noriega and kind of points further south than we were originally proposing. You'll see that this proposal also forms, a sort of network. Bike share stations don't really work that well when there's just 1 or 2 of them spread out and really far from all the other locations. And the reason, there's lots of reasons for that. One is, if you do get to a station and it's full of bikes and you might need to park it at another station, we want that other station to be close by. Or if, everyone has already taken out the bikes in the morning and you're looking for one, you shouldn't have too far to go to find an alternative station that will also have bikes. In general, we like our stations to be spaced about minimum of a quarter mile apart from each other, and up to about a half mile. The Sunset doesn't have the same amount of density as other neighborhoods, as you all know. So this proposed network is not as dense as we would propose in downtown or Hayes Valley or kind of other parts of the city. It's a little bit more spread out just because the Sunset just is also a little bit more spread out. And I can go back to the slide, but just to kind of continue up, we've been working and reaching out to all of these groups since 2020, just to try and engage people in the whole process. We started out with a general idea and have slowly gathered community input in order to kind of come up with this proposal that we have today. We had some virtual open houses with Supervisor Gordon Moore in 2020, did some tabling at the farmers market, and right now tonight, we are looking for any feedback that you might have, either on the network as a whole, on specific stations. Also wanted to let you know that on December 17th, the SFMTA will be holding a public hearing. So this is a part of the public outreach process. We will be sending out mailers to all addresses that are within 200 feet of any proposed station, letting them know about the date of that public hearing and how they can provide their input. We'll also be posting notices on street poles at every location of those proposed station. I will make sure that Albert, he continues to get kind of the notice about this meeting so that folks can weigh in. You can either send it an email, there will be an email address, or you can tune in live to the public hearing to provide public comment. So I think with that, I'll keep the screen up, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Josephine.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think having options for bike rental or e-bike sounds attractive. However, I do have a concern that, you are one of the many bike share providers. And if you alone, Lyft alone, is going to take up 17 stations, which I assume that will be at least ×2 parking spots each, at least 34 parking spots, or maybe even more, right? Then if you have another competitor, say Uber wants to do the same thing, and then some other competitor wants to do the same thing, Spin, I don't know how many competitors that there are. And so that is going to balloon. So is there any limitations on how many providers are there that can provide in the Sunset? I know there's also Ford Bike, Go Bike, or something like that. So what are the limits? If each one of your providers is going to take up, I don't know, 40 parking space ×5, then, Sunset only have, a couple thousand parking spots, and it's dwindling by the day.
Adrian, I think you have your hand up. You want to take that one?
Thanks, Josephine. That's an excellent question. And I will just say really quickly, there's only one allowed bike share provider in the entire city. Like that, like Lyft. It used to be Go Bike, and then it was this company that owned them called Motivate, and then Lyft bought Motivate. So there's only one contracted bike share provider. There's no other bike shares allowed even to operate in the city. That's based on Lyft actually sued the city to be like, we have exclusivity, and we're like, yeah, we agreed that was the settlement. So there's no other operator in the city, and they're the only ones that can do stations. So there won't ever be another company that comes in and says like, hey, we're going to do stations too. So that, yeah, and that's actually an MTC regional contract for stations. So I just want to make that clear. There's no other providers for bike share in San Francisco allowed.
Neal, Adrian, for clarity, can you just say how big or how many spaces or how long these bike share stations will be?
Yeah, they vary. A couple of them, two of them are actually supposed to be on the sidewalk, so they don't have any parking impact. And the size of them ranges from about 15, the capacity is about 15 bikes to I think 23 or 27 bikes. And that is about 2 to 4 parking spaces. So I think an average is about 3 parking spaces for the 15 stations. So we can ballpark it to be around 45 spots.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just go ahead and call some people that have their hands raised. David Wong.
Yeah, you just mentioned. Thank you. You mentioned about the not affecting parking spaces. So I'm more or less okay when I see that happen. When there's big enough sidewalk space, and you guys could go ahead and park your bikes there. The frustrating thing is for a lot of the local folks is parking's tough enough already, and we take up all these other spaces for the bikes, and then you have all these other stuff going on about, oh yeah, you can't park here for 3 months because something else is going on. It's happening all over the city. So are you guys at least looking first to see if you could find sidewalk space wide enough so you guys could build these things out, or you guys are just looking within your quarter mile of each station to say, okay, where can we find space regardless of it's affecting a parking space or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. We absolutely try and find sidewalk locations. I think the Sunset District, even more so than a lot of other neighborhoods in the city, the sidewalks are actually quite narrow in most places, and so there really are not very many good options. But a lot of the criteria that I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of criteria. We don't meet every single criteria for every station, but we just try and meet them all. So it's a little bit of a of a dance to try and find a suitable location. But yeah, we try and find sidewalk locations when we can. And if there's one that you can think of, perhaps we weren't aware of it, please do let me know. We can take a look at it pretty quickly just to give it a kind of a quick assessment.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, our store's in the Sunset, but I actually live in the Richmond district, so I see them all over the place. But I remember the one, I think, near the Walgreens. You guys were able to make one there on the sidewalk, but that was a very wide sidewalk too.
Yeah.
So is there a way it'll be less bikes though, but I know you guys have to position it in a way where, the length of the bike goes across the sidewalk. That can you make it where it's parallel, that maybe you only have like 2 bikes and then 2 bikes, make it in a row where people could still get it, but it doesn't take as much sidewalk space? Change the design of how you guys do it basically.
I think I know what you mean. There's, perhaps we can talk about that offline. We have some limitations on the geometry and actually how it's arranged. I don't think that we're able to physically do kind of what you're doing, because does need to be some kind of connection with, some wires. They are connected to the kiosk. So it's a little bit more challenging than that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I guess, Tina, do you want to go next?
Oh, okay. So my question is, when you how do you decide that you will need 17 station in Sunset? Because Sunset, it's not really a big giant district, and how do you come up with that idea? How many station will you need? And as you know, that Sunset actually it's already have so many public transportation, throughout the street. And do you also put in the factor that all the public transportation already available and the demands for bike shares? And how do you
Yeah, that's also a good question. There's no real formula that gives us a very precise, say like, oh, this area needs this many bike share stations. We use a lot of best practices both in the Bay Area and elsewhere to kind of do a best guess. There was a lot of community interest in having more of them than we originally proposed. That's something that we heard, so we added some stations. The good news is that we can do a lot of evaluation very quickly, and more or less real time to see how people are actually using these stations once they're in. It takes a little while for people to get used to it, but that's something that we can take a look at, 6 months, a year after they're installed, and reassess. Perhaps there's some stations that are not being well utilized, and maybe we can take a look and reach out to the community and maybe figure out why that might be the case. Think about moving them, think about adding or subtracting, depending on how things are going. The e-bike data that I shared really indicated that people are biking to and from a lot of those commercial corridors that I mentioned. And so that's a good indicator for us that we're really interested in adding this additional layer and hopefully meeting that demand that's there.
One more question. Do you guys plan on doing anything to give back to our community?
Yes. So bike share is a system that Lyft actually is funding. So we are funding this on our own dime to provide this service to San Franciscans. We also have a really strong Bike Share for All program, and Bike Share for All is our low income pass. So for those that qualify for various low income programs like CalFresh or PG&E Cares or Muni Lifeline, you'd also be eligible for Bike Share for All, and that would give you unlimited bike rides for $5 for the first year, and then $5 a month after that, which I think is probably one of the most affordable transportation options here in the city.
I'll also add giving back to the community. In terms of mobility, when we agreed to have e-bikes in the city under this contract, as an amendment to this contract, we put a specific zone because the outer Sunset is so far from, is farther from the core areas of where the bike share system already exists. And so there's actually a per minute cap in the Sunset so that people, it becomes a more attractive option, because if you're charged per minute, it goes up and up, and you're kind of stressed out and, all sorts of things. But if you have a cap, it's like, hey, I already know it's going to cost this much for the entire ride. And so it gives it a little more freedom and opens up that. So I'm sure we can think of more community partnerships, but I just wanted to say that, the geography of the Sunset is something in our minds, and we want to figure out, how to help that. And we have taken steps in the past, and we're open to hearing your thoughts.
I think a lot of comments on the chat, basically a lot of people saying that we need to preserve parking space. Sunset is a family-oriented neighborhood. 75% of households here are families. It doesn't matter how free the bikes are. Sometimes we just can't ride bikes when we have kids and grocery lugging around. But we wanted to, personally, I wanted to support this effort, but I would like you guys to maximize spaces outside of parking spot. There are spots on the greenway, on the medium, on the sidewalk, next to grocery stores, schools, parks, libraries. They all
Josephine,
have a little.
I'm sorry, you're speaking a little bit out of turn. I know you have great opinions, but I'm going to have to ask you to withhold those. Paula, go ahead. Your hand is raised.
Thanks. I had a couple questions. Hopefully they're quick. If you're looking at putting bicycles on sidewalks, are you consulting with senior groups like Margaret's Senior Power and other senior groups? Because that can create a hazard for seniors and people with disabilities. That's one. And then on the map, it looked like the southernmost street you had was Noriega. Are you putting bicycles on Taravel? And if you are, where are they? And if you are not, and you decide later to do that, do you have to start the process over again, or you just go to the Board of Supervisors and they let you at it without the community input? So if you could respond to those 3 questions, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, the senior group that you mentioned, I wasn't sure if you maybe you could repeat that or type that in there. That would be helpful, so I could maybe reach out to them specifically.
Margaret, can you do that? Because Margaret Graff, who's one of our members, formed that group called Senior Power. Can you put that information in for him, Margaret?
Thank you, and I'll take note of that group, Senior Power. Question about Taraval. So we, I mentioned that the density of stations is really important, and so we are not proposing any stations along Taraval because it's just kind of adding in just a lot more geography. We don't really have the number of stations in order to make it work. Like I mentioned before, that you can't really put outlier stations. They all kind of need to form a network that's rather continuous. So, we weren't even going to go to Noriega, but based on a lot of the community feedback, we were able to add a lot of stations there. So our intention right now is that we are not going to be going all the way south to Taraval with the classic bike share stations. However, currently our e-bikes are able to service some of those areas. If we do make changes in the future, I think that we would probably be looking at the neighborhood as a whole and perhaps proposing changes, based on a lot of the data that we get at some point in the future. It does not go to the Board of Supervisors, but the MTA does have this public hearing process. So any kind of proposed change that we have, I would absolutely alert groups like POPs and like many more about anything that we are proposing, and that would happen in the future, and it would have a community outreach process.
Thank you.
And I forget what the third question was. I apologize.
I think you covered them.
Okay, thanks.
All right, next we have Jeff Daniel.
Hi, Neal. Thanks for talking with us. I specifically wanted to ask about the south end of Great Highway. Sorry, as a lot of people are riding bikes and Lyft bikes along Great Highway. I spoke to an elderly woman, Joni, the other day, who takes 2 buses to get a Lyft pedal bike to be able to then ride it a couple of miles to get down to Ocean Beach and drive it along Great Highway Park in the weekends. So in particular, the lower reach of Great Highway is going to close to car traffic in early 2023 from Sloat to Skyline, and that's going to become a purely park and walking path. There will be no more car traffic south of Sloat. And so I'm just wondering, and that tends to be a destination that a lot of people drive to come down and access this part, the lower end of Sunset. Do you guys have any plans to put a station, especially if it's a park zone there? You could probably install stations where they would not affect parking in the slightest on park space there, where there will be bike paths.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I think for a future car street, that you mentioned, the Sloat to Taraval, or Sloat to Skyline, excuse me. That's something that we can consider in the future. We don't yet have plans to bring the network as far south. That would be an additional, several stations. But we definitely are keeping our eye on all the different street changes that are happening across the city. Separately, we're actually working with Recreation and Parks Department to bring some stations into Golden Gate Park. We are coordinating with the MTA on their slow streets and other kinds of changes that they have. So, while it does take a little bit of time and community work to come up with new locations for stations, it's actually relatively quick and easy for us to add or subtract or move stations. They're not really bolted into the ground. We can just pick them up with a crane and put them somewhere else. So, bike share actually benefits from that way compared to like a bus stop or a lot of other things that take years and years and years of infrastructure and very expensive infrastructure. So short answer is not yet, but we'll keep an eye out, and I think love that idea.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, and Barry Hermanson.
So I hope you'll consider putting a bike share docking place out near the end of Taraval. And I think it'd be good for your business. and people would ride the L out, they could rent one of your bikes. And if they only wanted to ride as far as Judah, before taking the train home, they could dock it there. I think you can make, it'll be good for business out here too, draw more people.
Thanks for the suggestion.
All right, Barry. Christy.
Hi. Yeah, I live near Irving, and I think Josephine and Jeff's recommendation is very good to find, bike parking maybe near the park or schools, because on Irving, Merchant is very busy, and if the bike will take extra parking space, it will be very hard for shoppers to come on Irving to shop. And plus, as we all know, 2550 Irving, they're building a huge building, affordable buildings on 26, 27. That's going to create a lot of parking issue, because the 99 unit, they only provide what less than 20 parking. So it's going to be a big issue for the neighborhood in the community.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. On Irving, some of the stations are on Irving, some are on the cross streets, and I think our perspective actually is with affordable housing sites. For people that are perhaps low income, taking transit and riding a bike is probably a lot more affordable than owning a car. And I think that's the direction the city wants to go, is to provide a lot of those transit options that go along with the affordable housing developments, because really they are the cheapest way to get around. So we see a strong nexus for locations like that for bike share stations.
And I'll add, thanks, Neal. And I'll add, we are coordinating with the D4 Supervisor Mar and focusing on that housing project on Irving. And I know there's a lot of complicated feelings about it. But what Neal said, I think it echoes something that we think here in the bike share program that is worth saying. The unique thing about bike share is that it's about mode shift. So it's just reducing the barriers to bicycling. And in no way, I want to be very clear about this. It doesn't mean that we expect everyone to be like, I'm going to ride my bike instead of driving a car. We know that there's lots of people that need to drive. Josephine, I think you talked about that community in the Sunset, and we're in no way are we saying people need to ride their bike, but we do think that there are a lot of people who could ride a bike for certain trips instead of driving, and this is just trying to lower the bar and so lower the barriers to that. And so as the system expands to more places, it becomes more and more viable for more trips. I think that makes sense, right? Right now you have e-bikes in the Sunset, which could be a little more expensive than a regular pedal bike. They get parked on the sidewalk sometimes instead of at the station. Stations allow, actually there's a financial incentive to park at the station instead of on the sidewalk wherever the station is, either on the sidewalk or on the street, but not at a bike rack or parked kind of in a random place. So there's actually a financial incentive. It's cheaper to end your trip on a sidewalk, at a station. So what I'm saying is that the cool thing about bike share is it tries to address a little bit of the demand side as well as the supply side of parking space and driving. The idea is that if more people can get places without having to drive, then there's less competition for parking or congestion in general. And it's not that everybody does that. You might be very comfortable in your car, but think about the visitors to Sunset. If they're coming in to visit a friend or something or shop, and they can do it on a bike, it just makes that a little more easy. It's supposed to lower the barrier. That's just the macro level thinking behind this. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you guys. Is there anything more to add to that?
Well, I appreciate all the questions. My email address is there in the chat. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And like I said, December 17th is another opportunity for you all to provide input and feedback if you don't do it with me directly. So I'll make sure that Albert gets that information. I think it's about 2 weeks prior to the hearing. That's when it's all kind of put together. Yeah, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's a late night for you all, but really been really a pleasure working with the Sunset community here.
Thank you. And then just to let everybody know that we will have our meeting minutes out in a couple days, and it will give you access to the chat boxes, so that we will have all those emails and links available for you guys to peruse through for any information that you may need. Okay. Whew. That was a heck of a meeting today. I hope that you guys all have a better sense of what's going on with Lyft, you know, and what they're going to do in our city, in the Sunset. And again, the Golden Gate Park closures, please visit the survey. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have input. And you know what? It goes for naught if you don't put it in the survey, because that becomes official information right there that they have to take into consideration. And as far as Mr. Boudin, I know there was a lot of questions out there. Leanna, you sound like a really tough lady. Appreciated you throwing some tough ones at him. I'm going to try to invite him around early next year. We will not be having a December meeting. We're going to be having our usual annual dinner, but stay tuned for that. But I hope that kind of enlighten you a little bit. I know that he gets a lot of press in the newspaper, but now you get to hear it from his mouth directly. So I hope that was informative for all of you. Thank you. And without further ado, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Okay. Any questions?
Thanks,
Any last
Al.
questions?
Thanks, Albert.
Cool. All right. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Albert.
All
No,
right.
I will just say I thought that was a great meeting. It was so much information on things we really had questions about.
Hey, we don't run boring shows.
Thank you, Albert.
Okay.
Thanks, Albert.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Albert. Bye.
Hi, guys.